Hello and welcome to today's Art Online conversation, and we're welcoming back Paul Harfleet. Hi Paul, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Not too bad. We only spoke briefly, but well, we spoke recently actually, but that was when we're in lockdown. It feels a little bit different to be out of lockdown now, sort of.
Well, it's not really either or, is it? It's just a kind of a strange, slightly, but not properly. I suppose it will happen more. It's just a bit strange, isn't it, really?
It is. We're just going to get used to it, I suppose. I think one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today is that there's a film that you participated in, If Homophobia Ended. And this was a short film which it basically details your history with the Pansy Project and also the work that you did in Stavanger, in Nuart in Stavanger. So yeah, basically I wanted to take the opportunity just to talk to you about the film and the work you did with Nuart in Stavanger. Okay, yes, good. That's a good idea. How was the Stavanger experience for you? And tell me about the Pansy Project that you did over there.
So I just watched the film again. It's such a lovely sort of, I'm in it, of course, so of course obviously. It's great. But the way that the guys have edited it, it's just so lovely and it's calm and nice, and it does capture the experience. So as I say in the film, I didn't have pansies there as I normally would. So I had to kind of think about what it was that I was going to do beforehand. And they did say they might be able to find them. So I took my trowel just in case, but I also took some paints and brushes, thinking that that's what I would probably do, paint and draw them, or draw and paint them. They were paintings. And so what I do is I plant the pansies usually at the site of homophobia, and in Stavanger, I had to paint them instead. And I wanted them to be small and similar to actually the size of the flower, because that felt right at the time. And it was just a really interesting development of the work and an interesting context to do that in, because it's a street art festival. And I hadn't really been invited in a street art festival proper before. For me then to experiment with street art proper, there was really kind of right somehow. And the response was really nice.
I noticed in the film as well, you talked about, how you actually painted it. So you were lying down and you're painting it. It looked quite uncomfortable actually to some extent, but that's and then in the Pansy Project, you also lay down, you have to photograph the pansy. It's a really nice little juxtaposition really there, that actually you're still doing the same sort of thing.
It's striking to me that it struck me at the time, of course, and it is and was uncomfortable, especially because there it seemed to rain whenever I would lie down. But the thing that's powerful to me is that I'm often marking violent homophobia, and the people that have been attacked are knocked to the ground, and then I go and lie on the ground where they had been knocked down, plant, or in this case paint. So there's something about the action of lying on the ground where someone had literally often been hurt and pushed to the ground. It's really significant to me and sort of emotional. It makes me connect with that location in a kind of a strange way. And obviously it's not a usual thing to do, lying on the street in that kind of way. So people often look. And when I'm painting or planting or documenting the planting, people often think I've fallen over or that I'm dead or hurt. So there's an echo of the action where people think, oh, are you okay? Or is everything all right here? Because from a distance, it just looks like I'm quite still lying on the ground. So there's lots of really nice kind of connections with it in that way.
And in the film, you talked about one of the locations, because actually you talk about Stavanger as a town, and finding the appropriate places to actually, place the pansy. And you spoke about one incident that you came across of homophobia, and wanting to do it justice, really, pay it the respect that it deserves. So ensure that you've got the pansy in the right place, So you seem to be thinking a lot about that context and making sure that when you're painting on that wall, is paying it homage an appropriate term to use, do you think, or paying the appropriate level of respect?
Yeah, I think it's about respecting the experience of the people before. It's a really the thing for me it's almost funny and absurd what I'm doing, of course, because I'm planting a pansy at the site of homophobic hate crime. It's a ridiculous thing to do, and painting one is even more ridiculous, it seems. So there's part of that is the humor and the absurdity of it fascinates me, and the way that people often laugh or think it's silly or funny what I'm doing. But then when you get to understand what it is that I'm doing, you can see, especially when I'm in Stavanger, I was lying on the ground and people were coming up to me asking what I was doing, in perfect English, by the way, and saying, what are you doing? What is this about? And I would tell them, and as I was telling them the story, their faces would kind of be quite, oh, you're painting a pansy, that's nice. And their faces would drop as I told the story. And I'm really fascinated by creating work that is initially beautiful, but then there's an undercurrent of it that is significant and important and powerful, I think. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, and I suppose this is one of the things with partaking in something like the Nuart Festival, because a lot of the artists will create these beautiful works, and very often there is a theme or there's a story behind it. And then people that explore the city come across these works of art, suddenly notice your pansy down there, should know that there's a story behind it. So maybe that encourages people to then research and read more about the work. And I know that certainly I've written about your project in Stavanger. So by the very nature of creating art on the wall, actually you're reaching a whole different group of people because so many people are writing about it.
Yeah, and I think I was thinking that at the time is that the difference between painting and planting is that the pansy, once I've left, could just be a flower. There's no necessarily a sort of a reading unless you know about it. It's not necessarily obvious that it's an artwork, which I like. But the painting of the flower is a lot more obvious that it's art, because it is art. So it's perhaps more accessible, and you don't necessarily need to have the ciphers to read the work in the same way. But sometimes my publisher actually for my book saw a pansy that I planted on the street in London and had no knowledge of my work at all, but was able to understand what it was just by seeing this random pansy at the bottom of a tree. It's those kind of things I'm obsessed with, the symbolism and the sign of an object. I think it's just really fascinates me.
And the pansy itself is a flower that you chose purposely because of its double meaning, and you talk about this in the film as well. But could you just expand on what that sort of double meaning is and why you chose the pansy?
Well, initially when I was devising what I was going to do at the beginning of the project, I knew that I wanted to, because I was interested in roadside memorials and how they change the way you read the street. So you know that when you see a pile of flowers wrapped in cellophane by a tree, that someone's been knocked over. And I was interested in how that changes the way that location is sort of experienced. So I knew I wanted to do something along those lines, and I wanted the flower to be recognizable, and I wanted it to help tell the story. And I thought of pansy because of it. I'd been called a pansy as a term of abuse, but I didn't really like the flower very much. I felt like they weren't powerful or strong enough. Now, of course, I love them, but the idea is that the way I take the photographs helps make them epic and helps tell the story. And in French, penser, to think, is what they're called in French. And interestingly, they were used as postcard icons in France. They would, like you would send a wish you were here to a postcard in English. Then it would be a similar thing, but it was like thinking of you from this place, like Avignon, and there'd be the bridge in Avignon with pansies around it. So there's kind of like a rich history in France of that sort of the thinking of you and thinking, and the idea of it being a double meaning. So, and I just like that sort of the history of the flower, and the way that we as humans kind of breed and change the way that the natural world, I suppose, is kind of interesting to me. The kind of the flower is named and bred from the wild viola into a sort of domestic pansy that is just very generic. And then I like the way that it's kind of, you can change that and warp it into a different thing.
And the fact that at some point in history, you know, in France, to get that sort of name, you know, to think that actually throughout history, perhaps, you know, it got its name because people would look at that flower and reflect, and just, you know, who knows how it got its name, but that's a nice thought.
Apparently it was because the flower looks a bit like a face, and it kind of bows as if it's in deep thought. That's the kind of idea of it. So it's that, I suppose. And there's all the thing about the center of the pansy has, often it's referred to as an eye, because it has almost like eyelashes coming out of the center of it, and depending on the sort of patination of the flower, it can look quite a lot like an eye and sort of an abstracted face, which I also quite like.
Is it personality, doesn't it? Each pansy has a very specific personality that's associated with everything's different, but with a particular location.
Yeah, and I take a lot of time thinking about which, because when I'm planting, and it was similar with the painting, is that I'm in the location, and when I have the flowers with me, they're a bit like a palette, and I'm choosing the flower based on the environment and the kind of color and how the sky is looking, etc. And when I had the paints with me, I was like, okay, what color pansy will this be? And I could choose it. And I kind of realized that afterwards, I didn't copy a pansy. They were just in my head because I'd drawn them so much from my book. I just sort of drew it from my head. It was really weird that I didn't even think of copying it, really.
It's going into your subconscious now, you see. You can just
yeah, well, I've spent 15 years looking at pansies, so it's not surprising I know how to draw them.
One other thing that you've done recently, and again, part of the Lockdown Edition with Nuart, is a piece of work in Aberdeen. Although you weren't there, you actually sent the work up there, and it's a series of paste-ups from all the artists that were going to take part in the Aberdeen Festival. Obviously, that didn't happen, but you were able to send your works to them. Can you tell me about the work that you sent up there and is now on the walls in that great city?
Yeah, so it was kind of, at that point, it was very early on in the lockdown, and I was kind of freaking out about the fact that I wasn't going to be able to make any work and do my usual work. And it was sort of troubling me in terms of, if I can't make the work I usually make, what is it that I do and what is my function? And so I was sort of thinking about what a poster would do and what it would be. And it's funny and interesting to see them all now, and everyone's made them sort of in silo, and then you see them and they're so different, completely different, but have a similar kind of message or something. But I was thinking about the words. I was thinking about, because I think it was just after the Queen's speech, and she was saying, "We will meet again." And it really struck me at that moment how weird that was. And there was all of these kind of connections to the war effort and fighting COVID like it was kind of some sort of enemy. But there was also this idea that we were trapped in our homes. So I felt like I started just writing one morning, really early in the morning, thinking about what it was I was going to do. So I came up with this sort of stanza. And then the thing that popped really was that we shall touch tomorrow. And it felt like I was saying, I will touch Aberdeen tomorrow, and I will touch people tomorrow, and we will also survive until tomorrow. So I liked that sort of, the kind of layered meaning of it. And I sort of entwined forget-me-nots around it. So I'd already done some drawings of forget-me-nots. So I liked bringing some sort of horticultural message in a way into it. So it's like a neat little note that you might not know that it's a forget-me-not, but it is a forget-me-not. And that's it's almost like saying, "Forget me not, we shall touch tomorrow." So it's almost like a little poem, really. But and it looks really lovely, because obviously I had no control over where it was going to be put, and neither did I want it. But it was that kind of idea that, how is it going to appear, and how is it going to be documented? And it just looks, where they've pasted it, I think it's a hospital, or something, an abandoned school or something. And it just feels very sort of bleak, but hopeful, and weirdly, the colours of the building they've chosen that perfectly, because when I was thinking about the pansies, I knew that Aberdeen's granite that lots of the buildings are built out of are pink. So lots of the photographs you see of Aberdeen, there's like a pink hue around the granite. So I wanted there to be like a pinkish lilac-y colour to the poster that I did. So, and that kind of tied in with the lilacs and slightly referencing the pansy. But so it was strange and slightly nerve-wracking, because I don't really make that sort of work. So I was like, this could be absolutely terrible. I had no idea, but it sort of works. So I'm happy with how it feels and looks. And the message is cute.
So once again, I mean, lots of layers in that one poster, really. I mean, there's a longing. Seems to be there's a longing for the city that the fact that the festival didn't happen. We will touch again there, and but also recognition that this sort of major thing is happening, and the Queen's, what the Queen said, and tying all that together, and the forget me not. There's a layered meaning once again, and that seems to be constantly coming through your work. There's always multiple elements to it.
Yeah, I suppose, yes. That's kind of why I like symbols and signs and clues and in the work. And I suppose that I did think about it really carefully, but it was because the Pansy Project is so ingrained in me and I've been doing it for so long. Making new work it's a great challenge for me, actually. It's good for me to do that. I would always challenge myself within the Pansy Project, but making work outside of it is a different experience, and in a way that might not have happened without the lockdown. But
possibly not.
Yeah, so it's kind of been an interesting journey, really, for me, even though I've not left the house.
Yeah, I know your work's getting out there like there's no tomorrow. I mean, I was speaking to John Reed from Mood of Clap's blog, and he does a lot with work with Nuart, and he went around posting all the paste ups, the posters up, and he was saying that he was looking. I'm misquoting him probably, but looking for different locations, unusual locations where it doesn't make sense. You have to go out and find them. And it is a bit of a gift to the city of Aberdeen as well. It's giving something back. It can't be there in person, but we can do something else. And little treats, little surprises around every corner. And I think yours is one of them, and it's quite impactful when you see it. And particularly when you hear your story about where it comes from. Because otherwise because when you look at it and it's very pretty, so it's a nice phrase, yeah, lovely phrase. But actually it's again so much more to it. So much more to it than that. Yeah.
Who knew I was actually an artist?
I know.
It's almost like I know what I'm doing.
I know. Very impressive. Well, I think we'll leave it on that happy note. The short film that you've got that you made with Nuart in Stavanger is If Homophobia Ended, and you'll be able to see that by the lockdown editions of Nuart as well. And it's a great, lovely film. It tells us all about your work, and it's just lovely to watch. So,
just to be sure, I didn't make the film. I was just featured in it. Yeah, so it's kind of like MZM Projects, maybe.
Yes, MZM. Yes, that's right. Yes, and
so I don't want them to think I'm not. I made this film.
True credit.
They followed me around and they were lovely to work with.
Yeah, I've seen a few of their films actually, and they are beautifully crafted.
They're so talented, lovely. Yeah.
So anyway, that's it. Thank you very much for talking to us again.
Thank you very much. Stay safe.
And you. Bye.